I'm going to talk to you about an idea called backcasting. Backcasting from principles. My name is Ian Findlay. Backcasting is a method for planning which has a fancy name, but actually we use it all the time, very, very naturally as human beings. But it's not so commonly used when we are trying to plan in complex systems. For example, if we're trying to start a new company or develop a community. It's kind of an alternative to forecasting, which is what people are far more familiar with. So you might think of forecasting when you're doing financial planning. Forecasting is very useful for things like that. But if we're trying to plan for a complex situation, which basically planning into the future tends to be, then forecasting is almost tailor-made to generate disaster, which some people, myself included, think this is kind of what unsustainability is taking us towards. So backcasting is a method for planning for complex situations in the future. Forecasting has limits. It tends to stifle innovation because we are usually making our decisions based on things which we already know. It tends to take problems from the present with us into the future. So an example would be, there are more roads needed because there are more cars. There are more cars, so we need more roads, so we build more roads and we end up with more roads filled with more cars. This is what's happening all over the world. As opposed to trying to plan for a future where maybe we try to figure out, well, people need to move. Is there a way that we can do this that doesn't involve just having more roads and more cars and more use of fossil fuels and covering over more forests and more farmland? So backcasting is an alternative to that. And it tends to come in two different forms: backcasting from scenarios and backcasting from principles. And they are quite, they're very useful, they're very compatible for working together. Backcasting from scenarios is kind of like doing a jigsaw. So you start off with an image of the future. So it's like the picture in a jigsaw, and you put the pieces together until we generate that picture. That's fantastic. If the scenario that we're trying to plan for is very simple and straightforward and clear in everybody's mind, it's very, very useful, very effective. It has limitations because sometimes the scenarios that we're trying to generate are really unknown or very complex. And it can be very difficult to get large groups of people to completely agree and have a completely shared vision of what it is that scenario might be, and therefore how do we plan to get there. Challenges can come up because scenarios can change in your head over time, although you don't actually realize it. Somebody maybe has a different perspective, somebody perhaps has different vested interests. So it has limitations, but nevertheless is a very useful planning method. When it comes to planning for sustainability, there is another method, backcasting from principles, which has been developed by an NGO based in Sweden called The Natural Step, which is based on science and was arrived at through a consensus process over a few years, about 20 to 25 years ago. And as opposed to being like a jigsaw, planning from principles is more like playing chess. So how many ways are there to win a game of chess? Millions, billions possibly. What they all have in common though is that they comply with principles for checkmate. Now everybody who understands chess understands those principles. The king has to be under direct attack. The king can't move to another space where it's not under attack. The piece which is attacking it can't be blocked or taken. If those principles are achieved, checkmate. The same thing applies with sustainability. There are 4 principles which have been agreed within the scientific community, which can be applied to a scenario to check whether or not it complies with the principles for sustainability, and almost by definition, therefore, is able to exist in the future. Almost by definition, if there is going to be a future for humanity, it must be a sustainable one. So, essentially what we do is we, or rather the benefits for this approach, backcasting from principles, is that everybody can agree on these principles. This has already been achieved. This allows for people to communicate very clearly. So the filmmaker understands the principles for sustainability. The farmer understands. The economist, the chemist, the biologist, the physicist. Now when we talk about sustainability, we all know exactly what we're talking about in terms of the principles that need to be achieved. And this allows people to bring their specialist knowledge to help understand and solve very particular problems. This is a big step forward, because previously your definition of sustainability might have been different from mine, and they were probably both sort of maybe in the right area, being correct, but not specific and not clear. And they need to be clear because we are running out of time. We are destroying the biosphere at a rate that can't be sustained, and we need to get smart about the decisions we make very quickly. So a process that we can use for planning to comply with these sustainability principles, of which there are 4. I'll not go into them at the moment, they're a bit superfluous. We go through what's called an ABCD planning method. The A is about awareness and teaching people about the sustainability principles so that they understand the challenge. The B part is a baseline analysis. Where are we? We use these 4 principles to analyse how our company operates, how our community is operating. We compare how we're doing things to how we would do them in terms of these 4 principles. This shows us how we're being unsustainable. The C part is a compelling vision. What would my company, what would our organisation, our cooperative, our housing co-op look like in the future if we were complying with these 4 principles? Well, we would have to do things like this. We would source our raw materials from a company that wasn't drilling fossil fuels out of the Arctic. We would find our food locally. We would buy our clothing from organisations abroad that aren't denying people basic human rights. The D part is when we make decisions. So it's about understanding where we are, where we need to get to, and how do we make the path from here to there. Without understanding where we are in terms of unsustainability and where we need to get to be sustainable, we could be doing anything, and with the best intention in the world, we could be doing the wrong thing. This is probably what a lot of politicians and business people are doing. Actually, they're probably trying to do the best they can, but when it comes to sustainability and the conditions that society needs to meet, they're illiterate. So understanding the conditions that we need to move towards, improving your understanding of the requirements of what a sustainable business has to look like in terms of where you access your raw materials, where you access your energy, what you're actually contributing to, what does your product, your service actually deliver. And these 4 principles can be very, very useful. They can also be quite intimidating because they are not easy to achieve. But better off having a 50-year vision of something which can exist and can contribute to the regeneration of society and the biosphere, than plodding along and hoping that everything will be all right. If you use forecasting as a planning methodology, it's quite obvious everything is probably not going to be all right. The great thing about this is the tools are there to help us make better decisions, and with careful planning, some education and a lot of effort, then we can make some much better informed choices and hopefully make a difference in the world. So the best way to go about learning how to use this approach is to go onto the internet. The information is all there, and the process, as I say, is something we all do naturally. We use backcasting when we cook food. We use backcasting when we decide how we get from A to B. It's something we all do anyway. But learning the actual methodology can be done very quickly, but actually putting it into practice is where we really learn. So it's a straightforward process. Understand where you are, understand where you want to get to very clearly. Does it fit within the sustainability principles? Use your imagination and your innovation how to get from here to there.